Emily Carter had not planned for anything to change that Friday evening. It was supposed to be just another tired day in her quiet suburban life outside Chicago. The sky was gray, heavy with rain, and the air felt cold even though it was still. Early fall. She parked her car in the driveway, sat still for a moment, and stared at the front door of her own home as if it belonged to someone else. Inside that house was her husband of 22 years, Daniel Carter, a man she once loved deeply, a man who once held her hand in grocery stores and kissed her forehead in the kitchen. A man who now barely looked up from his phone when she walked into a room. She stepped inside. The house was quiet. The television was on, but no one was watching it. Daniel was in his office, the door half closed. She could hear the clicking of his keyboard. Work. Always work. "Hey," she called softly. "Hey," he answered back, not coming out. That was it. No hug, no question about her day. Emily went to the kitchen, dropped her purse on the counter, and rubbed her neck. Her back was tight from standing all day at the hospital. She worked as a nurse, 12-hour shifts, always moving, always caring for others. She gave her energy to strangers. She gave her patience to patients. By the time she came home, she had nothing left. She wished someone would take care of her for once. The doorbell rang. She almost ignored it, but something pushed her to answer. It was Ryan Thompson, their neighbor. He had moved in 2 months ago, divorced, quiet, polite, the kind of man who shoveled snow from her driveway once without being asked. He held a small package. "It's got delivered to my place by mistake," he said with a small smile. "Oh, thank you," she replied. He studied her face for a second. Long day. She laughed softly. "Is it that obvious? You look tired," he said gently, not in a rude way, in a noticing way. And that simple act, noticing, hit her harder than she expected. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "Just my back killing me." "From work?" "Yeah." Ryan hesitated for half a second. "I used to train in massage therapy years ago. Nothing fancy, just muscle work. You ever need help with that?" She blinked. It was such a normal offer. Simple, kind, still something about it felt dangerous. "Maybe another time," she said lightly. But that night the pain in her back grew worse. Daniel came out of his office only to grab a drink and return inside. "Can you rub my shoulders for a minute?" she asked carefully. "I've got a deadline," he replied without looking at her. Maybe later. Later never came. At 9:30, she stood by the window in the living room, staring at the rain. Across the street, Ryan's porch light was still on. She told herself not to do it. She grabbed her phone anyway. "Hey," she typed, "about that massage offer. Does it still stand?" The reply came fast, "Of course, only if you're comfortable." Her heart beat faster than it should have. 10 minutes later, he stood inside her living room. The house felt different with another man in it. Not wrong, just alive. Daniel was still in his office, door closed, headphones on. Ryan stayed near the entrance. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," she said, though she wasn't sure about anything except how much her shoulders hurt. She sat on the couch. The lights were dim except for a lamp near the corner. Rain tapped softly against the windows. Ryan stood behind her. His hands hovered for a second before touching her shoulders. Warm, firm, careful. She inhaled sharply at first, then slowly relaxed. He pressed gently into the tight muscles near her neck. "You carry a lot of tension here," he said quietly. "I know," she whispered. He worked slowly, professionally. There was no rush, no weirdness. Just steady hands and soft breathing in the quiet room. But something inside her began to wake up. It wasn't desire at first. It was attention. The way he asked, "Is this pressure okay?" The way he adjusted when she said, a little softer. He listened. No one had listened to her body in years. Her eyes closed. She let herself sink into the couch. She forgot about Daniel in the next room. Forgot about being 46. Forgot about feeling invisible. For those few minutes, she felt seen. touched with care, considered her breathing. Slowed, then it changed. She felt heat in her chest. Not from his hands exactly. It's from the closeness. From the fact that someone was choosing to stand there and focus only on her. Ryan must have felt it too. His hands paused for half a second. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Yes," she said, though her voice sounded different. Thinner. The air grew heavier. He moved slightly closer to reach the center of her back. She could feel his presence now, not just his hands. Her heart began to race. She hadn't felt that kind of rush in years. That scared her. She opened her eyes quickly. This was wrong. She was married, but was she? In paper? Yes. In spirit? She wasn't sure anymore. Ryan stepped back suddenly. "I should stop," he said, almost to himself. She turned around to face him. His expression wasn't playful. It wasn't lustful. It was conflicted. "This isn't what I meant when I offered," he said quietly. "You're married." She swallowed. "Nothing happened?" "Not physically," he replied. The words hung in the air. Not physically, but something had happened. Something quiet and powerful. She stood up too quickly. The room felt small. Rain hit the windows harder now. "I didn't mean to make this weird," she said. "You didn't," he answered. "I just don't want to cross a line." That word again. Line. She thought of all the lines that had already been crossed in her marriage. The distance, the silence, the nights she cried alone in the bathroom so Daniel wouldn't hear. Where had those lines gone? Ryan moved toward the door. "I should go." He opened it slightly. Cold air rushed in and panic rushed through her chest. If he walked out now, everything would go back to gray, to silence, to being unseen. "Ryan, wait." He stopped. He turned slowly. She didn't know what she was about to say. She just knew she didn't want this moment to end like nothing. "I don't feel married anymore," she said quietly. He stared at her, searching her face. "That doesn't make this easier," he replied. "I know." Silence. Heavy. Loud. She stepped closer without thinking. Not touching. Just closer. She struggled for words. "I just wanted to feel like I mattered." The honesty surprised even her. Ryan's expression softened. "You do matter," he said. For simple words, for words she hadn't heard from her husband in years. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't expect. He noticed that too. Careful, slow. He reached out not to pull her close, but to wipe a tear from her cheek. That small gesture broke something inside her. The line was right there. Clear, bright, waiting. And in that quiet living room, with rain falling outside and her husband only a few walls away, Emily Carter felt her life shift. She knew this was the edge. She knew stepping forward would change everything. And for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't sure she wanted to step back. Emily Carter didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her life pressing down. She thought about Ryan, his hands, his voice, the way he had noticed her when no one else did. She thought about Daniel sitting in his office, absorbed in his work, oblivious to her loneliness. The contrast was unbearable. She realized just how empty her marriage had become. She had spent decades giving herself away, first to Daniel, then to everyone else. And in the quiet of her living room, she finally recognized the hunger inside her. Not for romance, not for passion, but for being truly seen the next morning. Emily made small excuses to herself as she prepared breakfast. She avoided Daniel's glance and kept her phone close, reading the messages from Ryan. They were casual, polite, but tender. "Hope your back feels better," he had written. "Call me if you want another session. Only if you want." That little addition, "only if you want," lingered in her mind. It wasn't just a sentence. It was respect. It was the first time in years someone had made her feel safe and wanted at the same time. Work was a blur that day. She smiled politely at her coworkers, her mind elsewhere. Each patient she helped felt heavier than the last, but the thought, Of returning home, seeing Ryan made her pulse quicken. She kept imagining the way his hands had pressed against her shoulders, how he had paused when he felt her hesitation. That memory alone filled her with both warmth and guilt. She was married, yes, but she had long forgotten what it felt like to be cared for like that by Friday evening. She was shaking slightly with anticipation. She told herself she would just ask him a few questions about his work. That's all, nothing more. She arrived home early, hoping Daniel was still busy. He was, thankfully, absorbed in his laptop. She texted Ryan quickly, keeping it short and careful. "Are you free tonight?" His reply was immediate. "Yes. Come by if you want. No pressure." When Ryan arrived, there was no awkwardness. He smiled and nodded, carrying his bag of massage oils and tools like he always did. They talked briefly about trivial things, the weather, his new apartment, her favorite coffee shop. But beneath the surface, everything had changed. The air between them was charged, every glance carried more weight. Every movement felt intimate. Ryan didn't rush, he didn't press. He simply existed there, present in a way that made Emily ache inside. The massage began slowly, just like before. His hands moved with care, easing the tension in her back. But this time, Emily felt something different. She felt a connection, a spark that had nothing to do with physical touch. It was emotional, deep, and unspoken. Her heart raced. She wondered if Ryan felt it too. She dared to glance at him, and their eyes met briefly. There was understanding there. There was acknowledgement. Of a shared loneliness, a shared yearning for something real. Days turned into weeks. The sessions became routine, though still unspoken in terms of romance. They laughed quietly, shared little stories about their childhoods, about losses, about regrets. Emily realized how much she had missed emotional intimacy. Daniel had been a companion, a roommate, a provider, but not someone who understood her fears, her frustrations, her dreams. Ryan did. He remembered details. He asked questions. He listened. Every word, every small gesture made her feel alive. Then came the evening she hadn't anticipated. Emily had come home early from work, hoping to relax for a few minutes before Daniel arrived. She heard laughter upstairs, a sound that made her freeze. She walked quietly to the stairs, heart pounding. The laughter grew louder. I wasn't Daniel's? Not exactly. Was lighter, brighter, and it made her chest ache. She crept closer. Her mind raced. She had imagined betrayal many times, but hearing it was different. She pushed the door open slowly, and there it was, Daniel with someone else. Not just anyone, but someone who laughed at his jokes, touched his arm, leaned close as though she belonged there. The room spun. Emily's stomach turned. Her hands shook. She had suspected Daniel had grown distant, but she had never imagined he had already moved on. Years of silence and neglect suddenly exploded into one painful, undeniable truth. Daniel noticed her immediately. He froze for a moment, caught off guard. Then the mask of composure fell. "Emily," he said, voice strained. You moved on a long time ago," she said, voice trembling. "And you didn't tell me? I didn't think it mattered." He replied, "You were already checked out." Silence fell. Years of neglect, of unspoken words, of shared dinners and separate lives filled the room. Tears spilled down Emily's face. She didn't shout, didn't scream, just stood there, watching the man she had loved for decades embrace someone else, realizing she had been invisible in her own marriage. The confrontation that followed was painful, messy in emotion, but quiet in action. They didn't break things. They didn't shout at neighbors. They sat, talked, cried, and admitted the truth. Daniel had checked out emotionally years ago. Emily had only now admitted to herself that she had been lonely, starved for care and attention. They had failed each other, and then there was Ryan. He had been waiting patiently, offering support without demanding anything. He didn't pressure her, he didn't push. But he offered understanding. a safe space, and validation, things Daniel had never provided. Emily realized something important. This wasn't about passion or physical desire. It was about being acknowledged, about feeling alive after years of neglect. The days after the confrontation were quiet. Emily moved out, renting a small apartment downtown. Daniel stayed behind in the old house, entangled in his own life, and the divorce papers were signed without drama. Emily felt a strange mixture of grief, relief, and anticipation. She grieved the life she had known, but she felt relief at being free to choose herself. Ryan remained a constant presence, careful not to intrude, gentle in his patience. He never asked her to rush, never demanded more than she was ready to give. They spent quiet evenings together, sometimes just talking, sometimes sharing small walks around the city. Emily began to understand that love and attention weren't always fiery or dramatic. Sometimes it was simple. Sometimes it was steady. Sometimes it was about choosing to be seen every single day. One evening, as the city lights reflected in the rain-soaked streets, Ryan asked softly, "Do you regret any of it?" Emily thought of the lonely nights, the ache in her shoulders, the silent house, the lost years with Daniel, and the tiny spark of hope that Ryan had reignited. She shook her head. "No," she said quietly. "I regret waiting so long to realize. I was unhappy, but I don't regret remembering that I'm alive." Ryan reached for her hand, gentle, steady, and warm. Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known for decades. The future was uncertain. The past was painful. But in that moment, she understood something vital. She had survived the darkness of neglect and heartbreak, and she had found someone who reminded her that life could be tender, compassionate, and real. Emily smiled for the first time in a long while. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know where the relationship with Ryan might go. She only knew that she had chosen herself, chosen to feel, chosen to exist fully in her own story. The city lights flickered around her, and she realized she was no longer just a shadow in her own life. She was alive. And that truth was worth more than anything she had lost.